Good evening and welcome to Galactic Terrors for March 2021. I'm James Chambers.
And I'm Carol Geisander.
And we are excited to welcome you back, or for the first time, to the Galactic Terrors online reading series, which is sponsored by the Horror Writers Association New York chapter. And tonight we're excited to present readings from four terrific authors: Gary Frank, Alp Beck, Gordon Linzner, and Angela Yuriko Smith. And we'll be bringing them on each in a little bit. Tonight we're just going to get started off talking a bit about what Galactic Terrors is and what the Horror Writers Association is. And Galactic Terrors is a reading series that we launched in September of 2020 in response to not being able to do our traditional and very much missed in-person readings around New York City as a chapter. And those in-person readings were called the Night Terrors Reading Series. And we did them at many places: the KGB Bar, the Lovecraft Bar, the Kill Bar, the Museum of Morbid Anatomy, and a lot of other places.
Otto Shrunken Head. I mean, that's perfectly appropriate, right?
What was that?
That's perfectly appropriate, right?
Yes. Otto Shrunken Head had perhaps, out of all of those places, has the weirdest decor and the coolest mugs. And unfortunately, we can't share cool mugs with you tonight, but we can definitely share some great readings. A little bit about the Horror Writers Association, for those who may not be familiar with it. It's an international support and networking group for people who write horror fiction or dark fiction of any kind in any medium. And among the things we do is host the Bram Stoker Awards every year for recognizing superior achievement in horror fiction. We host StokerCon as well, which will be coming up in May. It's virtual this year due to the pandemic. Everything will be online, May 20th to the 23rd. If you are interested, you can check out stokercon2021.org, I think is the website. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of information there about registering and what the programming will be. And we're going to do our best to emulate the in-person live StokerCons of the past. So it should be a lot of fun. Among the other things the HWA does is offer mentorship program for new authors, scholarships for authors in various fields, a newsletter, and lots of other stuff I'm not thinking of off the top of my head.
Yes, that's quite true. And one of the things I appreciate the most about HWA is if you're able to be in a local chapter like we are, the Horror Writers Association of New York, we get together once a month, and now we're doing it virtually, but it used to be in New York. We would meet in person. I missed that, but we'll do it again someday soon. And it was great because we would do a business meeting and just hang out and chat. And there's something really wonderful about sitting and talking to other writers. Writing is a very solitary experience. You know, we usually sit and write by ourselves or in a coffee shop or whatever. And I think one of the greatest things about Horror Writers Association is the camaraderie and the support and the friendships that I make. Really great people too.
Yes, they are a lot of terrific people throughout the HWA, and in particular in the New York chapter.
We're not prejudiced, no.
No.
No. And I think that's one of the coolest things that's going to happen with the virtual StokerCon, because, you know, going to a convention in real life is really cool because you get to hang out with people in the hallway or wherever you might happen to meet. But that's one of the facilities that's on the platform that's being used for Stoker, as well as the ability to chat with people. And I think that's something that we might all miss. So if you're interested in going to Stoker, I highly recommend it.
Yeah, I think, we've all learned that these virtual gatherings can certainly don't replace being face-to-face in the same room with people, but they are a great way to keep in touch. And I think StokerCon, the virtual StokerCon, is going to be a lot of fun in that sense. And one of the big benefits that it does have is that it's going to allow people to attend from pretty much anywhere in the world. Mm-hmm. And that's something we've seen on Galactic Terrors. We've had readers from New Zealand and Australia and Canada, and we'll have some readers coming up in the future from other places around the world too. And it's kind of neat. The only real obstacle there are the time zones. So we have to be able to convince people to either stay up really, really late, get up really, really early, or take some time out of their lunch break or something to join us.
Eminently worth it, of course.
Completely, yes. And it's been a lot of fun. So I think, shall we jump into our readings, Carol, or there's some other things that we should chat about?
No, I think that's a great idea. I'm dying to hear some of these stories. These are all fun people and good writers, and we've got some good stuff to look forward to. So, there is one thing I want to mention beforehand, though. We have a newsletter. You may not know about that. All we use it for is Galactic Terrors. Somebody told me the other day that, I always mean to go to the readings, but then I forget about it. So if you want to just sign up for our newsletter, it's easy to do. We don't spam you. We send out only 2 emails a month. One is to remind you ahead of time, and the other is the day of the event, just to remind you, by the way, it's today. So to me, every day is Blur's Day, so I think that's a great idea. So cool. So I hope you do join the newsletter and come in with us.
Yes, please do. And also like and subscribe to our YouTube channel if you'd like to get updates that way. You should see down below the screen the option to like this video or to subscribe to Galactic Terrors YouTube channel. And one of the great things about the channel is that each of these readings is recorded and archived there, so that if you're unable to attend a reading that you'd like to see, you can always listen to the recording the next day.
Yeah, and that'll work for the folks who are watching on YouTube, and for those who are watching on Facebook Live. We love you too. So I'm glad we get to broadcast to a couple different places. So that's terrific. Well, let me go ahead. I'd like to introduce our first reader, Gary Frank. Gary is the author of Forever Will You Suffer, a supernatural time-shifting tale of unrequited love gone horribly wrong, of Institutional Memory, a story of cosmic terrors in the corporate workplace, and he's also the co-editor of Dark Territories, the anthology from the Garden State horror writers. He's written a number of short stories, including Stay Here, which was published in the 2005 Garden State Horrors writer anthology called Dark Notes from New Jersey. He's also one of the associate editors at Space and Time magazine. A member of the Horror Writers Association since 2005, Gary's also been a member of the Garden State Horror Writers since 2003, where he spent 2 years as president. He recently joined the International Thriller Writers and Liberty State Fiction Writers. When he's not spilling his imagination on the page or working the day job, he's playing guitar. He's currently at work on his next novel, but that's another story. Gary Frank.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the show. My name's Gary Frank, and tonight I will be reading the first chapter of Institutional Memory. The link you see down at the bottom probably will take you straight to Amazon. My website is ancient and needs updating, so I will not send you there. You'll get lost in the catacombs below. So, here we go. Institutional Memory, Chapter 1, Tuesday, Sharon Walters. Humming a Burt Bacharach song she couldn't remember the name of, Sharon Walters rode the elevator to the basement. It was a song she'd heard that morning on the radio while her husband Harry dressed for work. She'd made him his cup of coffee and prepared his turkey and Swiss cheese sandwich with a pickle for lunch. They'd kissed and said goodbye. He said, "I love you," and she repeated the same. She never liked to say "I love you too." It didn't sound meaningful, more like an uninspired echo. The elevator rattled its way down through the old office building as Sharon watched out the diamond-shaped window at the floors passing by with the speed of a senior citizen walking his last steps. Sighing, she glanced at her watch to make sure time moved forward and wasn't coming to a halt. In 2 hours, she'd be having lunch with Marcy Brown, one of her coworkers. After that, she'd leave for her weekly acupuncture session. Though she'd been afraid of the needles at first, acupuncture turned out to be a great way to relieve the weekly tension. After having lunch with Marcy, as much as she liked the woman, she needed something to help her relax. Marcy tended to be anxious and self-conscious of everything she did and said, and that could get overwhelming. The elevator came to rest and the outside door slid open, then the gate, and finally the inside door. Cool, musty air, tainted with a funky stink like something had died and never been found, crept in and enveloped her, made her cringe, reminded her of how much she hated the basement. Stepping out into the cavernous area, she was greeted by the buzz and flicker of the fluorescent lights that bleached everything white and made the shadows more starkly black than they should have been. It was rare that she came down here, but she needed empty boxes to pack up files, and there were none left in the Osprey publishing office. Without further hesitation, she started across the basement to the stacks of boxes against the far wall. Something skittered above her. She stopped and stared at the 4 rows of fluorescents. Was something up there? The lights kept her from seeing anything close to the ceiling. Get the boxes and get out, she told herself. But she didn't move. Her gaze sought the dark space above the banks of lights where the unsettling noise came from. Darker shadows wriggled beyond the lights. It had to be her imagination. The sound probably came from somewhere else, and she imagined that it came from the ceiling. There were rats down here, and it was most likely one of them had made the sound, unless there were bats down here as well. Maybe it was Leo, the building's creepy maintenance man. He had his office near the elevator. He was too big and spoke too small, making him, in her eyes, the perfect serial killer. And here she was, by herself. That motivated her feet to move. 4 sizes of boxes leaned against the far wall, and she approached the stacks. She looked from one to the next, so by the time she reached them, she could grab the right ones and flee back upstairs to the 5th floor and the safety of Osprey Publishing. The first ones were too small. The last ones, of course, too big. Second or third. Third. There should be just enough. These should be just fine to. A quick, sharp electric buzz filled the air. The stink of ozone dropped down and enveloped her. She glanced up in time to see the fluorescents illuminate too brightly, flicker several times, and then grow dim as hungry blackness spread through them until all the light was consumed and the basement was left in darkness. Oh my God. Sharon's pulse quickened. She glanced around, praying her eyes adjusted to the dark before the rats found her. Holding her hand up, she couldn't see it in front of her face. All right, she thought. No need to panic. The emergency light should come on at any minute. Once the lights came on, she'd hurry to the stairs. They were faster than the elevator, and leave the darkness. Someone else could come and get the boxes. Her eyes adjusted to the dark enough so she could see her hands, but little else. If only she had a flashlight to see her way out, but she hadn't thought to bring one along. Emergency lights flickered on, casting the basement in blood-red illumination, pushing the shadows back, but not nearly enough. At the corner of her eye, something twisted in the shadows, but when she looked, it was gone. Get upstairs now, she told herself. With each step Sharon took, a feeling of exhaustion overwhelmed her until she found that taking another step was too much effort. What's wrong with me? I shouldn't be this tired. I feel so worn out. Trudging forward, she felt herself about to collapse, but kept moving, afraid that if she stopped, something bad would happen. In the darkness to her left, a stack of file boxes fell. In the corner, a long whip-like shadow snaked upward before it disappeared. Her mouth fell open and she made a whimpering sound. Was Leo doing this? Why would he play such a nasty trick on her? But it had to be him. What other explanation was there? A sheen of sweat broke out on her forehead. She had to get upstairs. Don't stop now. She paused and listened for a sound or something that would tell her where Leo. It was Leo, wasn't it? Where he was. Silence. Sharon almost called out, telling Leo to stop screwing around, but another part of her mind told her this wasn't Leo, this wasn't anyone, but something that her rational mind refused to accept. The lights went out and there are rats down here. That's all. No monsters, no boogeymen lurking in the shadows. But no matter how much she tried to persuade her irrational self that there was a rational explanation, the more the fear gripped her and sent her into a panic. Without another thought, she rushed to the stairs, gripped the banister, put her foot on the first step, felt her sweaty palm slip on the cold metal handrail, and stared up into the darkness. Was someone waiting up there? It couldn't be the thing because there was no such things as monsters, except wicked humans. No matter how she felt or what her imagination whispered to her, it was a person, probably Leo, who watched her, scared her just because they could. Leo was like that, real bastard when he wanted to be. She needed to go up the stairs and out into the lobby, and then she'd take the stairs to the 5th floor in the safety of Osprey Publishing. She would have gone back to the elevator, but if there was someone down here stalking her, they could get her before the elevator doors closed. Just climb, Sharon. Her legs refused to move. Fear at what could be waiting for her in the darkness, up at the top of the stairs, held her paralyzed. All she could do was glance toward the main basement, hoping she really was imagining things. Then she heard a soft metallic rasping in the ceiling, moving in her direction. Come on, Sharon, she told herself. Move, please. A tiny shadow bolted across the floor, and though she convinced herself that it was only a rat, it was all she needed to get her legs moving. She fled up the stairs, certain that the something was just behind her, gaining on her, its gaze boring into her back. Any second, its cold hands would grasp her legs and pull her back down into the basement and... Stop it, just get upstairs and everything will be fine. The door to safety was right ahead of her. A few more steps and from above her the metallic sound echoed. Something was slithering through the ceiling's metal framework. She focused on the door and safety and not the nerve-wracking sound of metal on metal that came from the ceiling. She shivered and whimpered against her better judgment, glanced above her head. A metal cable snaked down toward her. It was nearly as wide around as her arm, and it wove through the air, scraping against the metal framework. As she stared in terror and fascination, other cables, not as thick as the first one, snaked through the darkness. Oh, God. The door was only 10 steps away. Help me! Her voice was weak, barely more than a whisper. She staggered from the exhaustion that turned her limbs to jelly and her mind to wet cotton. Gravity had multiplied, pulling her down until it took every last ounce of her strength to lift her foot to the next step. The smaller, faster cables coiled around her wrists and pulled her backward and up. No! She wanted to sleep, to give in, to rest, but her will to live forced her to fight the cables, to keep her balance and get out. In desperation, she climbed one more step before more cables caught her around the waist and she was plucked from the stairs. As she kicked at the stair, her shoes fell and clattered on the steps. Help me, she screamed. Please, someone! More cables dropped down and wrapped around her arms, pulling her up to the ceiling. Sharon knew she was going to die. Her life wasn't supposed to end like this. A heart attack or a stroke or plain old age, but not murdered by some thing. Help me, she shouted. From above her came more slithering. When she glanced up, she could just make out 3 cables descending toward her. Please, someone help me! She glanced around, hoping to see someone, even Leo, but she was alone. Her heart was about to explode. She couldn't catch a breath. Each of the new cables had jagged edges that danced in front of her, coming close to her face. Help me! Sharon screamed, twisting in a useless attempt to get free. Please! A round shape on the thickest braid of cable reflected red light as it descended from the ceiling, shifting and turning as it came closer to Sharon's face. At first it appeared to be a composite of gears, pieces of sheet metal, and jagged bits of copper and silver. But when it smiled, Sharon realized she was staring at some kind of skull. The glass eyes, red points of malignant light, stared back. It made a hissing sound, followed by a terrible creaking noise, as if it were attempting to speak. But all that came out was the foul reek of motor oil. Please, please, please help me! Her voice was weak from screaming. Tears streaked down her face. For a moment she dangled helplessly with the impossible skull weaving in front of her. She begged God to help her, praying for mercy, for a quick and painless death, and then swearing she'd... Cold metal sliced into her upper arm and she cried out. Her breath came in short, jagged bursts. Warm blood dripped down to her hand between her fingers. Another cable's quick jab cut her and she gasped in pain and surprise. It was playing with her. She knew it, but couldn't do anything to stop it, nor could she do anything to calm her jackhammering heart. The next moment she was jerked up into the darkness, and all she knew was pain. Thank you.
Gary, thank you so much. That was wonderful.
Thank you. You're welcome.
So that was from Institutional Memory.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit more about the book.
So the book was written as my very first attempt at NaNoWriMo back in 2002. Same basic concept, but very different, very, very rough. And then it kept going, and I worked in corporate environments, and one day I thought, what if I'm like a blood cell moving through the hallways that are the veins of the building, and the building actually had a spirit to it? It kind of metamorphosed and such, as it were, to become this entity that's in the building.
That's very cool. It's almost a twist on the old haunted house trope where places can have like an evil energy.
Yes.
Or something. And I think most corporate places fall into that category.
Indeed.
We do have some questions for you from our audience tonight.
Great.
So let me grab the first one here. This is from Rob Atone. And he would like to know what you think it is about basements that we're all creeped out by them.
Hey, Rob. So basements are cold places generally. They have a dampness about them, almost an unnatural dampness no matter what time of year it is. It's just unpleasant. And no matter how bright the basement is, there's always dark corners. And for me, it's always been where things are stacked and stored. So there's way too many shadows and way too many places things could be hiding. And in my old house, I always had this vision of this white humanoid creature, coming skittering across the floor. And I just would run up the basement and somehow shutting the light off and closing the door. It was like I'm not in its territory anymore. So it was okay now. It would just stay down there.
Very cool. And then following that theme, T.L. James Glenn has another question. How much of this story came from high school basements or corporate workings?
Teal, corporate workings. I've been down in those kind of basements where things are stacked, and what would happen if the lights went out and then you were just stuck with the emergency lights in the cold basement, and then there's more shadows than anything else, and trying to, the heating system is making noises and the ceiling's got things going on, so it gets really creepy like that.
Very cool. And I'm just going to throw up a quick comment because this one is a nice compliment for your story from Linda Addison. Fast-paced corp horror.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you.
Great way to describe it. So one question I would like to ask Gary, what is it that got you on the path of writing dark fiction, horror fiction?
Many moons ago, and this story will go quicker than it sounds like it's going, I loved science fiction, fantasy, and horror. Robert McGammon's Stinger and Usher's Passing, and a few things from Edgar Allan Poe, and then into H.P. Lovecraft. I came late to the whole Stephen King thing. I had Dean Koontz's Phantoms and Darkfall before I hit Stephen King. And I was really excited about what horror did in terms of causing such an emotion. I was out of it for a while, wrote a fiction novel called Insert Title Here, and one day I was on a bike ride. It was a story of a band that the members were being stalked by a crazy fan. And one day I said, what if that fan wasn't human? And thus in a cold February bike ride, this book, which I will show you, Forever Will You Suffer, was born. The stalker is definitely something other than human. And interestingly, I had a problem writing the book until I figured out what she was. And once I figured it out, it kind of was just like butter, just went pretty easily.
Very cool. So it sounds like really what attracted you to horror was that emotional component.
Yes.
Which is a huge part of the genre and of dark fiction in general.
Yeah. I'm much more into the suspense aspect of horror, more than necessarily the blood and guts kind. Though it has its place, and in both of my books, there's more of it than you would think I would actually put in. But.
Okay. And one more question. This one is pretty straightforward. Carol Geisander would like to know, is the Garden State Horror Writers Group still active?
No.
Okay.
Sadly, it went. We'll have coffee, we'll talk. It was a very good group, and just changes happened, and it kind of fell by the wayside, to put it as politely as I can think right now.
Got it. Yeah, it's really hard to keep writing groups going long term. They have a life cycle. But our New York Horror Writers Association New York chapter is open to all people from New Jersey. So you're welcome to join us if there's anyone else who's out there, any orphans from the Garden State Horror Writers. And I see one more question came up, so I'll just hit this, and then I think we'll head on to our next reader. From Nick Zano, do you listen to music when you write?
That's a great question, Nick. And yes, and sometimes I discovered how my writing suffers from listening to certain types of music. I would just put on a mix in iTunes, and it turns out Bryan Adams is not optimal for writing horror. And what I've settled on, which really, really works, is a duo by the name of Midnight Syndicate. They're horror soundtrack music, and it's great atmospheric stuff to write horror to. So.
I love Midnight Syndicate. I've listened to them while writing too sometimes. Yeah, terrific stuff. Although, you know, Bryan Adams, I guess, can be horrific in his own way. Just not for writing purposes.
Not in that way, correct.
Right. All right. Thank you, Nick, for the question. Whoops. There we go. All right, Gary, thanks so much for the reading. We're going to move on to our next reader, and we'll have you back at the end of the program for some more conversation.
Sounds good.
All right. Our next reader tonight is Gordon Linzner. Gordon is the founder and former editor of Space and Time magazine and author of 3 published novels, including The Spy Who Drank Blood, and dozens of short stories appearing in fantasy and science fiction, Twilight Zone, Sherlock Holmes Mystery Magazine, and numerous other magazines and anthologies. He is also a copy editor, a licensed New York City tour guide, a sound technician, and lead singer for the Saboteur Tiger Blues Band, among other odd jobs. Gordon is a member of the Horror Writers Association and a lifetime member of the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America. So, please welcome Gordon Linzner.
Good evening. What you see down there below where you can buy novels, my short stories are all over the place. I'm going to read a couple tonight, very short ones. The first one is called Shudder, which you can find on the Allegory site. It's going to be up there until the end of April. It starts like this. Click, leaving a brownstone. Click, crossing Columbus Avenue. Click, waiting for a crosstown bus. Click, boarding. Click, getting off. Click, entering the office building. Annette Masters sat at her desk, staring at, but not seeing, the ledger before her. Her staff had left. She reached for the raven wig Janine brought her at her lunch hour, while Annette uncharacteristically ate in the company cafeteria. Delaying longer would only make her more obvious. She just hoped the wig and reversible raincoat would throw him. Who was he? She only recognized his clothes. A plaid, high-collared overcoat, green scarf, shapeless wide-brimmed hat, and the camera, always hiding his face, always aimed at her. She'd first noticed him 3 days earlier outside her home, following her to work, dogging her on the way back. He never came near or spoke. Confronted, he ran, but was soon back, clicking away. She should call the police, but for what? Taking pictures? She put on wig and raincoat, rode the elevator down, joined a crush through the revolving door. If she could elude him today, she'd feel in control. Maybe failure would discourage him. He sat on a fountain rim, gadget bag at his side. She tried not to look at him. Maybe she walked too fast, kept her head too low, moved too stiffly. A low, brittle, too familiar sound echoed above the traffic roar. Click. She ran. He did not follow. She knew, though, he'd soon be behind her or waiting up ahead. He was clever. There was no bus in sight. She glanced up. The sun set early in mid-October, but there was light enough to walk through Central Park. She could be home in 20 minutes. But Annette realized too late she'd taken the wrong path. 3 teenagers were discussing the contents of a brown handbag. There was no one else around. Show no fear or interest. Walk swiftly. Don't look like a victim. But anxiety shone in her eyes, contorted her face. They moved in. 2 had knives. Now, we don't want any trouble, do we, lady? Annette shook her head. Just give us the purse. Hey, she's a fox. You're going to settle for a purse? First teenager looked around, nodded towards the dark tunnel. Hey, you're right. Let's go take a walk, lady. Annette shook her head. She held her ground. They might decide she wasn't worth the effort. Or they might kill her. A hand tugged her forward. She went with it. Maybe she could use her attack as momentum to pull free. But then another hand gripped her shoulder. I know that trick. Just come along. Enjoy it. Click. Oh, come on. You're being watched, she said. Her captor looked back. Hey, he don't want any trouble either. Click. Help, Annette called out. Shut up, lady. Click. Are you just going to take pictures of me being murdered? Hey, he's got a camera. Not for long. Clop, clop, and the muggers melted away as a mounted patrolman appeared at the other end of the path. You okay, miss? Yes, thank you. I radioed for a patrol car. I chased them, but you shouldn't be here alone. I appreciate that. Can you describe them? I don't know. They looked ordinary. Click. Annette spun. The man in the plaid coat. He's got a camera. He took pictures. Did he? Oh, he's not leaving. Oh, here's my backup. Photographer said nothing to the police, his eyes fixed on Annette. They confiscated the camera. One of the officers realized at once something was wrong. There's no film in here. What? He opened the camera over his partner's protest. Empty. Maybe he just hasn't reloaded. Check his gadget bag. No film, new or used. No equipment, just old newspapers. Oh, we'll get a statement anyway. You too, Ms. Masters. Annette nodded. Her pursuer's eyes seemed to say whatever he'd been up to was over. He would not be waiting outside her brownstone again. She got home late, too keyed up to eat. She locked the door, stripped her bra and panties, turned on the shower, closed the bathroom door, finished undressing, stepped under the warm spray. After a minute, she felt a draft. She shivered, not from cold, then grinned to herself. The bathroom door just hadn't been shut all the way, that's all. She threw back the shower curtain and reached out to push the door closed. Click. And for my second story, short story called The Van, which is going to be reprinted in a forthcoming collection called Horrors from the Throne. The Van was the color of dull, dark, stale coffee with a border of crab shell orange rust around the chassis bottom. A plastic bag was taped to the missing glass of a rear window. Splattered mud made the license plates illegible. Still, the motor was well tuned, barely purring at high speeds. Attached to the grill by yellow twine was a foot-high doll, missing one plastic eye, the left one. Scraps of its tattered ballerina costume fluttered as the vehicle raced through empty suburban streets that Sunday morning. The 4-year-old wore a plain white cotton dress, which she'd proudly put on all by herself. Sunlight shone too bright. Air smelled too fresh to stay indoors, waiting for her parents to wake up. We'll be fine, she assured the bedraggled koala bear clutched beneath her left arm. We'll just keep near the house. Or at least at the yard. Or on the front lawn. Oh, certainly no further than the curb. And of course, she would never, ever step out into the street, not without grown-ups present, not even if there was no traffic in sight. Certainly not now. The van's front wheels swerved. With a metallic scrape and a thump, it jumped the curb at the driveway. The child opened her mouth. Another thump. The van jounced back onto the street, rolled to a stop. Then it backed up, hugging the curb, to be even with the child. The driver climbed out, leaving the motor running. He wore mirror glasses and a black t-shirt. His lips and lower chin trembled. The koala lay inches from the small, unmoving hand. The driver lifted it by a rounded ear. Under one plastic eye was a fresh streak, a scarlet teardrop. The toy trembled in his quivering hand, as if alive, unlike the child. Capillary action dyed her dress bright red. He did not try to touch her. There was no point. A scream came from the house. The driver spun about, leapt back into his van. Tires squealed, overwhelming the scream. The vehicle tore down the empty street. An hour later, 50 miles from the quiet little suburb, The driver pulled into a rest stop. There, it took a long swig of brown liquid from a bottle in the glove compartment. There, he got out to add fresh mud to cover the license plates. There, he removed the ballerina doll from the grill. The koala lay on the passenger seat where he tossed it while making his escape. Bare patches spoke of too many hugs. The fur beneath its single eye was stiff and black. He avoided touching it as he fastened the bear in the doll's place. The ballerina was tossed in a large cardboard box at the back of the van, a box that was half filled already with torn, soiled, road-withered toys. The van soared down the road again. The driver's hands once more held the wheel with a steady grip. Until the next time. I'm just full of cheerful stories tonight. And it looks like I have time to do one more very brief one. It was appearing in a whole collection of drabbles called Lost Lore and Legends, coming out later this year. This one is called Blanc Noir. The prince leaned mournfully over the open casket. Such youth, such a loss. Had I only known of your beauty sooner, he moaned. The woman's 7 pets groaned in unison. He stared transfixed, hypnotized by her allure. Those lips, as red as drops of freshly spilled blood. That hair, black as jet, absorbing every photon of surrounding light. Her skin as pure and white as bleached bone. He bent to press his lips against her cold, unmoving ones. Her eyes opened wide, blacker even than her hair. Her fangs sank deep into his jugular. The wolf pack howled in glee. And I think that's enough for an evening. Thank you.
Wow, Gordon, you have such different things that you were showing us tonight. I just want to say those first two were so astoundingly dark and terrifying for somebody who's a woman and a mom, you know, but I think it's really brave that you had the nerve to go there and talk about those things. So you got some amazing feedback in the chat as well. So thank you for sharing those. You know, very cool. Very cool.
I'm very happy to.
Yeah. Now, somebody had a question. Actually, Horror Writers Association New York chapter wants to know, Gordon, what exactly is a drabble? Can you explain that to us, please? For those who might not be familiar.
Certainly. A drabble is a story that is told in exactly 50 words. Not 49, not 51, 50. That's not counted as titling.
Right. And do you like those? What appeals to you about writing those?
I didn't write a lot of them, but this guy was looking for travels, and I thought I'll give it a shot. It's nice if you have an idea and you can condense it into a short thing like that. And originally I just sent him one. He said, you can send me 4 more. So I said, all right. And I sent 4 more, and he took them all. So good.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
Not a lot. It doesn't pay very well, but it's fun.
Even if they pay by the word, Yeah. No, that's cool. I think that's a really cool thing. It's an interesting thing if you think about it, because I know you've written novels and you've written short stories. So what are your thoughts about writing pieces of different length like that? Drabble is clearly the most focused, I guess.
Well, obviously it's depends on the storyline. Some stories like the Drabble did, maybe I could make that 70 words instead of 50, but it wouldn't really work if I did any more than that with the other ones I did. Mm-hmm. Some of my old sword and sorcery stories go over 10, 12, 15,000 words. The novels I've done are because I had enough for a novel there. Most of my stories, I get the story done in 5,000, 6,000 words, and that's all I need. If I add any more, I'm just padding it out. And sometimes I'll take a longer one and chop it down. Sometimes I'll take a shorter one and say, this would work better if I had this going on as well. Expand it. But each story has its own length, and it's up to the writer to figure out what that length is.
Cool. Well, we have a question from Angela, actually, one of our other readers tonight. She wanted to know, in the first story, I could see Central Park so clearly. Was that where that took place in your mind? And what inspired that?
Well, I happen to live 2 blocks away from Central Park. The story is set in New York. Mm-hmm. It only made sense to be using landmarks.
Okay.
And since I've been through those areas. And Angela should know about this because I sold her a story which also takes place in Central Park.
That's cool. That's cool. So, going back to, here's something from Christopher. I had another good question as well. The small, ordinary details create the horror in your work. Which comes first for you, the overall story idea or the small details?
Normally, it'd be like a general idea of a story itself, but then I have to figure out how I'm going to tell that story. But occasionally, also, just like fooling around doing research stuff, I'll hit on one or two small details, which in itself may not mean anything, but while I'm working some other story, that'll suddenly click in the back of my mind.
Ah, okay.
So it's a mix of both. I can't say one comes before the other.
Mm-hmm. And I know you write mystery, you write science fiction, you write some of this good dark stuff as well. Does that vary depending on what you're writing, or is your approach the same for all the different genres?
I'm quite sure what you mean. I mean, each story has a different mood. Obviously, a Sherlock Holmes story, which I've been lucky enough to sell 2 of so far, has a very different feel than one of your Raymond Chandler type mysteries or a noir where you're just following the bad guy going around doing bad stuff. Mm-hmm. Some really dark horror stories have a very light feel to them. Others, like those 2 that I mentioned, which were a little darker than I meant to do, but yeah.
Hey, this is a horror reading. Where else are you going to read that stuff? Come on. I appreciate that you shared them. Yeah.
But again,
okay. I also have to ask you. I have to ask you. You knew I was going to ask about the beginning of Space and Time. You started this many, many years ago, the Space and Time magazine, and you were making it yourself. Yes, tell us a little more.
I was in high school,
mm-hmm.
And I had purchased a mimeograph machine. This is how long ago this is. We're talking mid '60s.
Yeah.
So friends and I were thinking, hey, why don't we'll do a comic book. But if you've ever tried to draw on a mimeograph stencil,
yeah,
it didn't work out quite so well. So I thought, well, while we're trying to figure that out, since I've got the machine, I do something. I can type on the mimeograph stencil. Mm-hmm. So I'll put some stories in, about 3 or 4 of them with mine on different names, and friends had stories in there as well. And so the first 2 issues were all mimeograph and very hard to read right now. The 3rd issue, I discovered photo offset. So the 3rd one was a mix of photo offset and Mimeo, and then we went completely photo offset. And we get a lot more artwork in that way. And that's when people started appearing out of nowhere saying, hey, I have a story for you. What do you think?
Here. Yeah.
And suddenly,
if you build it, they will come, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's cool. That's cool. So, and I know you ran that for many years, and it grew and it grew. And I know Hildy took over from you, and then Angela from her. So, I'm glad it's still going. It's a very, very cool thing. That's neat.
I am too. We're still pushing, finding more new writers all the time.
Yes. That's really cool. That's cool. So when we all come back together, I want to ask you about what you might have coming up and coming out and such. But in the meantime, I want to say thank you so much for sharing your stories. And that was very exciting and way cool. So what I am going to do next is introduce Alp Beck. Alp Beck lives in New York City. She writes in all genres, but prefers horror. Her essays have been featured in the New York Times and the New York Blade. She's a big fan of the short story format and believes only when you master the art of the short story are you ready to tackle novels. Therefore, she will continue to write in the format until she gets it right. You can find her story To Thine Own Self Be True in Hell's Grannies, Kick-Ass Tales of the Crone by Lafcadio Press. In Heels is in A New York State of Fright by Hippocampus Press, and Dead Mall is in the anthology Hell's Mall by Lafcadio Press. She's hard at work on a series of stories, including Eyewitness and The Underride. Alp Beck.
Hello. Welcome to our reading. I will be reading a story from our anthology for the HWA NY, and it's my story called Heels. It takes place in the fashion district, and I will be reading part of the story. I don't think I'll make the whole thing, but I am happy to share it with you. And for the people that are afraid of horror, the part I'm reading is not that horrible, or let's hope it's not. All right, here we go. Gina cut through the throng like a shark, the fashionable spikes gracing her feet unhindered by the uneven pavement. The lunch crowd unzipped before her as she plowed forward, elbowing anyone who dared to stay in her way. Only the destination mattered. In a couple of weeks, the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade would march through here. The tourists were already peppering the sidewalks with their odious smartphones in hand. Occasionally, one would materialize in her path and attempt to snap a selfie. Gina barreled through them like bowling pins, enjoying their satisfying oomph as she made contact. She passed a hot dog cart. The aroma of Sabret's best made her swoon with hunger, but food would have to wait. She still had 15 pounds to go, and missing a meal could only help. Ignoring the temptation, she turned onto West 29th Street. The tiny thrift shop sat in the middle of the block, hidden between two clothing importers, easily missed. If you weren't looking for it. Only a hint of pale blue lettering remained on the sign above the entrance, daring its reader to decipher it. The dirty shop window blocked most of the natural light. The boxes on the other side of the glass removed any possibility of seeing inside. Gina had no idea how the woman kept her doors open. Addicts like her, she supposed. She opened the door, and the small brass bell above it tinkled. The familiar combination of stale air and fabric made her smile. She didn't know why. Anyone who worked in the garment district knew that smell. She imagined she could identify every type of material just by scent. She inhaled deeply and worked her way past a pile of clothes stacked haphazardly by one wall, careful not to topple the towers of discolored, sagging shoe boxes on the other. So, are they in? Gina asked. The silver-haired woman behind the counter grinned with her gap-toothed smile. A gold tooth gleamed in the dim fluorescent light. Sharp, penetrating, almost violet eyes looked out from a face deeply lined by the passage of time. In the 15 years that she had been coming here, Gina had never asked a woman anything personal other than her name, Malka. They came in this morning as I promised they would. Malka reached out from under the counter and brought out a shoebox. She placed it on the pot-marked wooden surface. Unlike the ones on display, this box was new. Gina's heart leaped at the sight of the famous signature, Louboutin. Malka stalled for a minute before lifting the lid, then revealed its contents. Gina gasped. These were even more stunning in person than when she first glimpsed them in the designer's line sheets 6 months before. The famous red soles contrasted the black, yellow, and blue patent leather above it magnificently. What was it with shoes? A new pair gave her such a high. But not any shoe would do, only unique, beautifully crafted, spectacular heels. She picked up the right one and examined it. The inspection was an important part of the ritual, determining the shoe's pedigree. She had no intention of buying fakes. In New York, counterfeit goods were commonplace, and even though Malka never had let her down, she would do her due diligence. $1,000 shoe for $400. How did the woman do it? Where did she get them? Who was she kidding? She didn't care. So, you happy? Malka asked. Over the moon. Good, glad you like them. Malka bent down and got her sales book. On the shelf behind the old woman, a torn shopping bag caught Gina's eye. A beautifully crafted, phosphorescent, multicolored heel jutted out from one of the tears. The swirls of color reminded her of a puddle of antifreeze. Could I see the shoes in that bag? Gina pointed. What bag? Behind you, on the shelf. The woman turned. She saw what Gina pointed to and shook her head. No. she said, agitated. That's nothing. Not for sale. You would not like them. I just want to take a peek. The woman shook her head. They're garbage. Nothing but trash. She took her pen and began writing out a receipt. You have to get back to work. Let me give you your receipt. Her stubborn refusal made Gina even more determined. Come on, that's not fair. Just for a second. Malka shook her head again. Look. I understand. I just want to see them. I need to see them. What's the harm? Not for sale. Forget them. Malka began writing again. Boom! An ear-shattering crash erupted from the front of the store, startling them both. Malka immediately grabbed what looked like a small bat from beneath the counter and came around, shouting in an unknown language. She flung open the door and ran out. Gina took advantage of the distraction, extended her body across the counter, and reached for the paper bag. She dumped it out in its contents. The most amazing cross-strap pumps tumbled out, with what had to be at least a 5-inch Van Peel. She gently laid a hand on their surface. A deep sigh of pleasure escaped her lips when she made contact. An unexpected shudder spread through her body, leaving her flushed and embarrassed. The shoes were hot to the touch, pulsing beneath her fingers. She could not identify the material. It looked like patent leather, but felt more intimate and familiar, velvety. She detected a layer of soft, silky fur on the surface, very understated. How could they be shiny, almost translucent, and have fur on them? Most of the shoe appeared black, but when observed, additional colors revealed themselves. Deep reds, midnight blues, even strokes of magenta. The various hues undulated, mesmerizing and soothing, like an underwater eel. As she watched the colors mix to reveal new combinations. An illusion, surely, but hypnotic nonetheless. She could not have said why, but she felt certain many hands and layers had built this shoe. She examined the stilettos carefully. Malka had lied to her. These were new, never worn, not a mark or a scuff anywhere. The more she held the pumps, the more she coveted them. Impulsively, she took off her own shoes, and slipped them on. A perfect fit. She glanced down. She felt powerful, tall. Her 4'11" frame was that now of an Amazon, at least in her mind. And wasn't that what was important after all? How a shoe made you feel? She laid her worn heels on the counter and looked at the Louboutins, laughing at herself for ever thinking they were special. They were pauper's shoes in comparison to what she had on. She slipped out of the store, briefly turning to see if she could see the store owner. A small crowd stood in front. Malka crouched in the center, looking down at 3 dead white doves. The spots of blood on the glass matched the blood on the bird's feathers. A chill traveled down Gina's spine. She turned back and hurried off. That's it. That's all. There's more, but I'm out of time.
Alp, thank you. What a wonderful reading. I'm not joking. People were loving your Malka voice.
It's the only accent. That's good. I didn't get to the part with the Italian because I can't do an Italian accent because I have one.
But you know I love that story, right?
Yeah, I do.
I do. I really, and
thank you.
I'm tempted almost to let you go ahead and read the whole thing, but I think people can easily find it in A New York State of Fright if they want to see how it ends. And it's really a great story. And because Alp didn't mention it, I'm going to. It did receive an honorable mention from Ellen Datlow in her year's best roundup. So
it was such an honor. It was. I was thrilled.
And I mean, it's such a New York story. It really gets the feel of New York City, of the fashion district, of all of that.
Well, I worked there for quite a few years, so I mean, I don't know what it's like now, but I remember that smell.
Well, how long have you lived in New York? It's been decades now, hasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But I've had every job on earth, so.
But there's, you have to spend enough time in New York to really get the sort of get the grit under your skin to write about it the way that you do.
I think, I'm sorry, I'm biased. New York is the greatest city. I don't care how dirty, how awful, how wonderful. You have a city that is disgusting in one block and beautiful in the next. And no matter what you feel about the city, there's always something surprising about it. I've seen cab drivers beat the crap out of each other. And then a beautiful little child asking for something from a woman selling flowers. It's just all side by side. That's what makes this different than. So yeah, New York, that grit for people that have lived here, and I'm sure you know what I mean. It's as you said, under our fingernails and in our blood.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a few blocks walk through the city, and you can see any number of different things going on. And I have definitely seen some aggressive cab drivers.
And this was before Disney arrived, so
right. So we do have some questions from the audience. So from Teal. You say mastering the short story before writing a novel. What do you think makes the perfect short story, and what length is perfect for you?
Well, that's a great question, Teal, but I don't have an actual length. I think that the length should always serve the story. So for me, a short story is anything that is not a book or a novella. So any length that serves the story. So it could be a page, it could be 50 words, like we heard earlier, or it could be 2-3 pages, 10,000 words, or whatever. I think the reason I say that is because when I came to this country, the first short story I read was The Lottery by Shirley Jackson, which to me, and still is, the perfect short story. And what made that to me a perfect short story is the brevity, the surprise, the anticipation, and the twist ending at the end in such a short form to almost bring the reader into some anticipation about a different ending than what actually happens. It's almost like something that lulls you. For me, a story should be encapsulated in, don't waste words. I mean, it depends on what you're going for, of course, but to me, a good short story feels like a really good meal without the dessert.
Okay. Another question, this one from Megan Arcuri. Did a particular pair of shoes inspire the story?
Not in particular, not the shoes that I talk about. The Louboutins were the first time I saw them. I think I was watching Sex and the City, and I was like, "Ooh, red soles!" But I'm not a shoe person because I've broken both ankles, so I have to wear flats no matter what. But I do remember dancing very late into the night in stilettos when I had balance. So I say that the shoe that inspired me is probably the Louboutin, but honestly, that craziness, and it seems to have, you heard it with who had the 400 shoes? It was Imelda Marcos, who had the whatever. I never understood that passion and wanting to like drool over a shoe. I do appreciate the art of the shoe. However, I never understood it. So I wanted to test myself and see if I could put myself into the headspace of somebody that just gets something from these shoes. So the inspiration is that I tried to find something that wasn't in existence. And I did spend a lot of time looking at so many images of shoes.
Yeah, the story is very clear visually. You really get a sense of what those shoes look like. You can picture them very easily, and they feel real.
Thank you. I think somebody told me I should have put more detail on the shoe, but I thought that good short stories should be a little bit like an impressionist painting. You should get the image without having to over describe.
You want to leave a little for the reader to fill in on their own.
Yeah, I think that your imagination has an unlimited budget, and you should treasure that.
Another question from Rob Atone. It feels like a Tales from the Crypt episode. Was that an influence?
No, but I will say that I loved Twilight Zone and Outer Limits and Beyond. I think it was called something Beyond Limits or Limit. I don't remember. I was inspired by those stories. So I guess you could say the Tales of the Crypt also comes, although I think Tales of the Crypt is a little more pulpy. But yeah, I think it was just, I was going to write originally a story about a version of, I'm going to tell you because I'm never going to write it. It was going to be a version of West Side Story, demons versus vampires on 42nd Street. And I couldn't get anything from that. So I moved further down to the 30s. And then I said Garmin District.
Very good. All right. And then here's a fun comment from Stephen Van Patten.
Ha!
One of those cab drivers was probably his stepfather.
There you go. Man, I miss those yellows. With Ubers, you don't see as much fighting. It's no fun.
No, that's true. They're all very polite and trying not to get in trouble.
No. Yeah, we've changed a lot.
Right. So, Alp, thanks so much. Your reading is wonderful. You get a lot of compliments on your reading. Very visual, very cinematic. But you have a background as a performer. Does that help you when you're reading?
Well, I was probably the shyest performer, but I was a singer. So I did learn that some of the same tools in singing and holding an audience and getting an audience has to do with fluctuation of voice, tone. So yeah, I think some of that does help. And I come from a very performing family. They're all performers. So yeah, I guess that helped being around it all the time, but I'm still not where I want to be. I want to be the reader that holds you forever.
Well, you certainly helped people tonight.
Thank you.
All right. So, Alp, thanks so much. I think we're
Thank
going to
you
move
very
on
much.
to our next reading, and we'll see you at the end of the show.
Thank you. I will be here.
All right. Our next and final reader for the evening is Angela Yuriko Smith. Angela is an American poet, Stoker-nominated author of Bittersweets, and co-publisher of Space and Time magazine, a publication that has been printing speculative fiction, art, and poetry since 1966. Join their Flash Battle Leagues, compete as an iron writer, and help raise an exquisite corpse at spaceandtime.net. Learn more about Angela at her blog, angelawysmith.com. And let's welcome Angela.
Hello, thank you so much for having me here tonight. I'm going to be reading from the Stoker-nominated this year Black Cranes, which is an anthology put together by Lee Murray and Geneva Flynn. And I have two stories in this anthology. One is Vanilla Rice. The second one is Skin Dowdy, and that's the one I'm going to be reading today. He was looking again. This time, it was a girl with a curly mane of fiber optics. As she walked by, her head burst into a dazzling array of rainbows. Leilani choked down the jealousy burning at the back of her throat and drew her husband's attention back to herself. Why don't I have hair like that? Are you holding out on me? His eyes focused on her for too brief a moment before returning to the Technicolor beauty being seated a few tables away. He sat mesmerized as the full rainbow spectrum played across his features. He was in a world of his own. A world from which Leilani was excluded. Finally, he spoke. She is absolutely stunning. I've never done a filament transplant on a whole head. Gorgeous. I'll be right back. I have to find out who did it. And just like that, he walked away to speak with the other woman. Leilani fumed. Typical of him to be fawning over someone else on their anniversary. What good was marrying a tech surgeon if she was always upstage? Her own fiber optic eyelashes seemed trivial in comparison. In sync with her mood. Whoops, that went too far. In sync with her mood, they framed her almond-shaped eyes in acidic green as she watched her husband reach out and stroke the other woman's hair. By the time he'd wandered back, Leilani had her emotions back in check. Berating him was pointless. She knew that from experience. It was always best to keep the bitterness hidden. She smiled brightly as he came back to their table, willing her lashes to flash pink and violet. Appearances are everything. So, who did it and when do I get mine? I didn't marry you just because you're so sexy, you know. A girl needs her gadgets. He reached across the table and touched Leilani's thick, straight hair, running his fingers along her scalp. Finally, some attention. We could do a partial embed, a nice thick implant you could braid. It can be programmed with pattern presets. It would really pop against all that black. A partial? No way! I need my whole head done just like she has. Why would you just do a partial? I'm your best advertisement. Use me. Side effects, darling. Having that much tech on her scalp is giving her headaches. You don't need that. Leilani set her jaw. I can handle a few headaches. That's what nerve blockers are for. That's why I have an anesthetist. She rolled her eyes. Do you know what it's like to be married to the best cosmetech surgeon in the city and walk around like a skin dowdy? He sighed, and she knew she had won. You already have more tech enhancement than most women receive in a lifetime. You're like a walking rave party. Even a blind guy has to notice you in a crowd. It was true, and she was proud of it. She urged her synapses to fire in rotation. Her color-changed tattoos flashed under her skin, giving her an aura in the dim restaurant. A dragon peeked out of her cocktail dress, its flames flickering along the edge of her collarbones. Tiny stars lit up across her brow, framing her eyes. Her lashes burned crimson, casting a red glow across her vision. She tapped her teeth together twice to engage the LED nodes before smiling back at him. She was dazzling in every sense of the word. He sat back, admiring his canvas, probably already planning the next editions. At the end of 3 weeks, she was done. Her plain and drab natural hair was a bad memory. Now she had a thick curtain of lighted filaments hanging past her shoulders. She loved the look she got as she flounced past gaping passerby with a flip of her golden tresses. She urged her hair to flash red and orange from the tips. She knew she looked amazing, but not amazing enough. Before long, her husband was looking again. This time, it was a girl with hollow project eyes. They were in the theater when the new distraction walked past them in a cloud of red hearts. Those hearts hovered in front of the woman like a curtain, scattering around her as she moved. When they touched the floor, they shattered into holographic glitter. The effect was mesmerizing, but too distracting in a dark theater. Bioprojectors should be banned in public, Leilani whispered as the lights finally came up. Her husband didn't hear her. He was already sliding his way through the crowd to talk to the hollow heart girl. Leilani felt like her own was breaking. They're called kaleidoscope eyes, he said when she caught up with him in the lobby. I read about them, but I hadn't seen them working. Absolutely stunning. Leilani opened her mouth, but he put a finger across her lips to hush her. Done, he said. You're getting Pele Fire Goddess vision. Leilani was so excited, all her tattoos lit up at once, and she gave him her brightest smile. Installing the holographic projection lenses was easy. Living with them was the challenge. The constant curtains of flame and lava they projected limited her vision. She fell down a set of stairs on the first day. Luckily, nothing uninsured had been broken. But it was worth everything. She did look like a fire goddess. Hovering before her, a molten sun trembled as it perpetually threatened to explode. Plumes of lava and flame spat from it, raining down around her. A path of magma and crimson orchids flowed at her feet. The effect stopped traffic. Way better than glitter hearts. She was perfect, but perfect was never enough. She snuck into her husband's private office when he was working late to surprise him, and was surprised herself. She unlocked his door to find him in his desk chair, pants around his ankles, and a naked woman on his lap. Leilani backed out of the room as soon as he jumped up. She hid in the utility closet at the end of the hall to try to compose herself. Her flames filled the small room, distorted by her tears. There was a hesitant tap, and her husband slipped in. Go away, she said. She turned her back so he wouldn't see her. He put a hand on her shoulder. She shrugged it off. That's never happened before, he said. You're a liar! Leilani grabbed a bottle off the shelf and threw it at him. The plastic split as it hit the wall, and the intense smell of rubbing alcohol filled the tiny space. Leilani threw another bottle at him. It's true. I've never cheated on you before. I love you. I just can't touch you anymore. She turned to face him. What do you mean? You always say I'm beautiful. You are. You are so beautiful. Too beautiful. It's like trying to have sex with a disco. There's too much going on. I can't concentrate. A disco? You can't concentrate? Leilani's heart thumped. You did this. You made me into a disco. I did all of this for you. Enraged, she swept the rest of the bottles to the floor where they burst open, spraying them both. The chemical smell was just adding to her headache. Leilani shoved past him. I did all of this so you would love me, and you screw a girl with no tech. She slammed the door as hard as she could. No tech, she screamed. I hate you and what you've made me. She turned her back to the door and sobbed, defeated. She was a joke. She had done all of this for him. And he turned around and went for the plainest, ugliest girl, a skin dowdy. Everyone would laugh at her. Leilani entered the office. The ugly girl he'd been with scuttled past, pulling her clothes on as she fled. Get out! Screamed Leilani, and she swept the receptionist's belongings to the floor. Through her projected flame, she saw a lighter left on the desk. Snatching the lighter, Leilani lit up a handful of glossy pamphlets as she limped back to the closet. Her own decorated face smiled back at her from the slick paper before warping in the heat. She opened the closet door and tossed them in. Have some real fire since you don't want the fake stuff anymore. The flames quickly caught, enveloping her husband in orange and blue. It moved faster than her own holographic fire. This was liquid and alive. Panicked, he tried to pat the flames out, writhing on the floor to reach them. Leilani slammed the door. The key to the janitor's closet hung on a hook on the outside wall. It was there for convenience. The door lock was meant to keep curious children out, not cheating husbands in. Things change for us all, she thought. She locked the door and tossed the key across the room. He screamed, jiggled the handle a few times, and screamed again. He body slammed it, but it was over faster than she thought. Leilani had expected more, not only from the real fire, but the whole relationship, from everything. He deserved this. She slumped against the door, aching and defeated until she heard the emergency crew coming down the hall. She stood up straight, fired all her synapses, and clicked her teeth for her brightest smile. Appearances are, after all, everything. Thank you.
Wow, that's the classic example of be careful what you ask for. You never do what you wanted. Well, thank you for sharing that. There were comments, people in the chat saying, "Wow, it's really terrific hearing you read this in your own voice." You know, I read it in the book and it was powerful then, but this is really cool. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me.
Yeah. It's a really cool anthology because there's so many interesting voices of East Asian women in there that all brought together, and it's just so powerful. So I love
no stories are alike. That's what is crazy about it. We all had such different viewpoints.
Yes, but yet it was fun reading from one story to the next because, you know, they all went together in a way. But I found myself, I would read one story and say, okay, I'm going to put this down for a while and think about the story, you know, and pick it up again because, you know, I couldn't help myself. So that was very cool. That was very cool.
Yeah.
So thanks for sharing that one. We had a question from Teal who was wondering, wait, I just scrolled past it. Angela, what drives your vision on this story and in general when you cross the line from cyber to fantasy? So what inspired you to this?
Usually it's so subconscious, I don't really know. I just kind of sit down and I start typing, and I always think it's a little bit like using a Ouija board. Really don't know what's going to come out. This story, I loved it when it came out. I've been trying to incorporate a lot more of what I love into my work, which is tattoos. And if I could have glowing tattoos, I would in a heartbeat. If I could have, you know, color change teeth, I would in a heartbeat. I'd get Google glasses. You hear me, Google? You need an experiment? Right here. I'm your girl. So that was kind of what the story was, a little bit of like a wishful thinking. But then it turns out, you know, maybe that wouldn't be so great. There's always the consequence of, you know, we have our phones, we love our phones, but we fall off curbs on our phones and we get into fall off cliffs, try to take selfies. And so that was kind of that whole thing. As far as crossing the line from cyber to fantasy, this story just goes where it wants to go, and I have no idea where it's going to go. That's why I have children's books. Sometimes they just happen.
So you're just at the keyboard saying, "Hold on."
Yeah. All right, I just got to get this down, and then I'm done.
Yeah, that's cool. So I'm intrigued by the different kinds of stuff that you write, though, because you have like Bittersweets is a really cool. I love the fact that it's renewable death experiences, which is cool. You know, I got that one a while back, but you know, it's called dystopian fiction. How does that relate to the other things that you like to write?
Pretty much I've been writing a lot of dystopian fiction lately. Vanilla Rice was the first story of that, actually. So it was really kind of cool to have it in Black Cranes, because it was the first one where I tried to incorporate my love of tech into horror, and kind of came up with this blend, this dystopian blend. Bittersweets is in that same world. There's actually a few nods back and forth between that. The second book brings the characters from Vanilla Rice into Bittersweets. And the third book has that all wrapping up with a very big connection. And then all of the stories that I've been writing lately seem to be springing from that. There's another one that I had written recently, and I can't tell where it's submitted right now, but it's basically in that world, and I won't even tell you what it's about, actually, because that would probably not be good.
Yeah. We'll in due time.
Yeah, a lot of them are springing from that world, though. This kind of place that's grown up in my imagination, that's everything is commercialized, everything has a price. There's no emotion anymore because it's just been leached out of us by tech and distractions and everything having a price. So it's a fun place to work.
Yeah. Well, I think that's really cool, though, because once you've built a world, and it's like your own little playground, your own playhouse, and you've got certain things you put in there, and then you can look at different assets, you can shine the light on different spots in your world, right, and tell different stories.
Yeah, and then it's fun to connect them up. Even if nobody ever gets where the connection came from, it's private fun.
Okay. Yeah. I have one I'm working on, and the factory that's in it is called Precision Castings, and that's the place that used to be behind my house.
Awesome.
And they worked all night long, and they opened the doors to the blast furnace, and nobody could sleep in the neighborhood. So yeah, I'm going to burn that place down. Yeah. So that's fair. Well, tell us. Let's turn. I'm going to turn my hat around. Don't do that on yours, because you'll mess up your headphones. But Space and Time magazine, we had Gordon here who started the thing, and Gary is one of the editors, and we know Hildy was in between and ran it for many years, and now you and Ryan and a bunch of other great folks are working on the magazine. Can you tell us a little bit about it now and what we can do with it?
Yeah, actually, I've got some super exciting news. I was like, if it organically comes up, I will talk about this. We're getting ready to start the Linzner Awards, which is in honor of Gordon Linzner, and it's going to be for stories, poetry, the nonfiction, the art. So everybody will get a chance to be recognized. Reader voted, so it's not us that's deciding. And yeah, that'll be the first Linzner Awards will be June 2022. So that season will start with this June, and that's June 3rd is kind of the nearest date that we decided is between Gordon and I, what is the birthday of the magazine. So that's kind of what we're aiming for. So.
Oh, that's really cool. That's really cool. Yeah.
Super excited. So we're looking at trophies right now, and like that kind of, the awards. It's not going to be any Bram Stoker, don't worry.
But people know who you are. Well, one of the things that I think is really cool about the magazine is you've got poetry, you've got, the Word Ninja recommendations from Linda Addison, you've got interviews, you've got short stories, you've got nonfiction stuff. You have so many things going in there. How do you put it all together, and what have you learned from working on the magazine? These issues you've done.
I think in my mind, I came from a newspaper background. Of course, a magazine is way different from a newspaper. But in my mind, I like to think of it like the whole thing is an orchestra. And so you can't have all of a prelude. You can't have all of, that's actually the sum of my musical knowledge right there. So insert other musical terms that would be in a symphony. And so that's why we try to break it up with some poetry. We've got Linda is just excellent at that. She just finds the best poetry. And then that kind of, you've got the heavy stories. We try to have some light stories. So everything kind of works together with texture. That's what I like to think of it as. It's just a lot of texture, and you're not going to get bored reading through. If you don't like one thing, that's not your thing. That's okay. The next thing might be your next thing, your perfect thing that you love. So,
so just turn the page. So just turn the page. Yeah. Oh, that's cool. That's really cool. So, okay, we have a question here from Teal James Glenn. I've got to ask this. Will the short story awards be called the Flash Gordons?
It will now. That's awesome.
That's fair.
As long as that's not copyrighted or something.
I was going to say, I don't know if you have to pay anything on that or not. But
yeah.
Oh,
yeah, because we do have the Flash battles coming. We've been doing them, which is 500-word battles for teams. So the writers all gather on a team. That way there's no losers, there's no winners. It's the teams that are winning, and everybody gets points. But that's leading up to the Iron Rider battles, which will be starting in June, kind of with the whole Linzner award ceremonies. And that's going to be solo competition, a little bit tougher. We didn't come up with that. That's an old thing that I used to participate in. And so we revived it with their blessing and their participation as well. So
that's cool. That's cool. How do people get on the teams? That's what I was wondering about when I looked at it.
Just go to spaceandtime.net. You'll see the icons there for the Exquisite Corpse, which is our community-built poem. Everybody can contribute to that. That's fun.
I got a line in one of those. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. Well, we're getting ready to open it again this Saturday for the next one. So, and all the Exquisite Corpses wind up being in the magazine now. That's my new thing because they're all so amazing. And I love just to see these bits and pieces that are not connected at all coming together to make one poem.
Yeah, so basically everybody submits one line and then somebody has to organize those into something that makes coherent sense. And I'm just astounded to see how you guys do that. It's just
It gives me goosebumps many times to be putting these together because you're like, did these guys talk? Did they collaborate on these lines? Because those are perfect together. But I'm going to trust everybody that they don't. And honestly, who cares? I mean, it works. It's good. They go together perfect. So. But yeah, just go there. I didn't answer your question. And you'll see the Flash Battle icon. Click on that. And then there's a sign-up form right there. And we're getting ready to choose new teams. And one of the teams is going to have ravens in it. So, yeah, the Minotaurs were not as popular as we thought.
I don't know why not.
I know, right? Who wouldn't want to be a Minotaur?
Right? Oh, well. So that's really cool. Yeah. Well, that's terrific. Well, I'm very excited to see, Space and Time continuing on, and it's very cool. Yeah. You and Ryan are doing great stuff, and it's very cool. So thank you for coming on to join us. I think it'd be really fun if we brought everybody back up now to chat a little bit. Does that sound good? Yeah. Gordon's celebrating.
And I promise we did not do this on purpose. I think we realized this after the fact that we have so many Space and Time personnel on board. It really was coincidental. I can guarantee that because I have been so distracted lately by StokerCon that such details were not really reaching my inner thought processes. But it's awesome. So it's the Linzner Award. Sound fantastic. That's really such a great idea and such a great honor.
TL said that maybe you should also call them the Flash Gordon Awards.
Yeah.
I love that idea.
Saying that. That's cool. Yeah.
Gordon, are you going to pose for the statue?
Oh God, I hope not.
They make 3D plastic things and print them. That'd be really cool.
Maybe do something with the beard and glasses.
Yeah.
We do have somebody working on a Saints candle, which would have Gordon on it instead of Edgar Allan Poe.
That's great. I think it's amazing that you started with a mimeograph machine, and the magazine is still going, and it's as strong as ever. And now you're launching all these great new things. So, Angela, kudos to you for everything you're doing with it. And Gordon, thank you for starting Space and Time. We need magazines like that.
And Gary, thanks for editing help. Yeah. And Alp, thanks for buying every issue. Yeah.
Oh, sure. You know what? I'll take an ad in your magazine. There you go.
Yeah. That's a cool thing.
You need advertising. It'll help support it.
Exactly.
Oh, okay. Teal's keeping up with the humor. I guess for the statue modeled after Gordon, he said we could just use a lawn gnome.
He is rolling tonight.
That would work, actually. Oh, Teal, we missed a question from Teal earlier. He asked about my writer influences.
Yeah.
I'm just going to mention one because I don't want to take up everything. The one that influenced me most was probably Fritz Leiber. That's when I realized I can write sword and sorcerer, I can write horror, I can write science fiction, because he can do it all well. I can too.
Cool.
And you have.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And mystery too. Yeah. That's pretty awesome.
So what does everyone have on the horizon? What's coming up? I know we've just talked about some big news for Space and Time, but what do you have in the works for writing projects, story books, things like that? Gordon, do you have anything you can share?
Well, I mentioned earlier I actually sold, if you had told me this a year ago, I would have never guessed it. I sold 2 Sherlock Holmes stories, and I'm working on 2 more right now.
That's fantastic.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you. There's a few other minor things coming out. I got a werewolf story coming up in the Horror-zine book of werewolves called Lixomania. So you'll have to look that up. There's a lot of stuff. I don't want to bore you with everything, but more recently, we've
Can you
got...
imagine that? There's so much stuff out there.
This is available now, Strange Lands. I've got a reprint in there. And Strange EN 2020.
That one was the Flame Tree one, right? The Strange Lands one? Wait.
No, I was going to read that one originally, and then I decided this was better because Todd Sullivan said he wanted to interview me just about specifically the story Shudder.
Okay.
I reread it, and I said, hey, yeah, this is a better story.
Okay.
Where can people find your Sherlock Holmes stories when they're published?
I don't have the details right in front of me. They're still doing Kickstarters on both of them right now.
Oh, okay.
So you go to look at my page on Space and Time. No, my Facebook
Space and Gnome.
My Face and Time. My Facebook page. I've been posting these things on it. So if you go there,
See, all those
you'll
little
find
shots
links
you're
to them.
taking are beginning to work their way there.
Yeah, I only had one so far.
Yeah, so.
Right.
Yeah, that's cool.
So.
And also, if people who are members of HWA New York put their news out to us every month, and we share that on our HWA New York Facebook page as well. So keep your eyes peeled on that, folks, and we'll have more news of things coming out from our members.
Well, if you don't mind my promoting myself.
Gary, how about you? Do you have anything coming up that you can talk about?
Unfortunately, I can talk about it, which means there's nothing seriously in the works that I have to read about. So I have a Bigfoot novella, because everybody needs one of those. It's with a fellow writer who's a Bigfoot aficionado, so I'm getting the edits from him and what he thinks works and what doesn't. I have a alternative history dark fantasy novel that had been through a bunch of agents, and apparently all of them were the wrong agents. And so I'm going to start looking again for the right agent. And somewhere in there I have a young adult horror novel brewing. So that'll be something completely different from my usual stuff.
Cool. Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
Alp, how about you? What's coming up?
I've got that story that you know about that I can't say anything. And I'm going to give you a lot of non-information. I'm also working on an adaptation of Heels for screenplay. And
Nice.
I have a story that I've been working on with my co-writer, Lori Jones, that I want to get back to, that we were really rolling on. And then, as with everything else, life gets in the way. But there's a bunch of half-done things there. And that story that I just wrote just came out in April's anthology. And so that's there. But I'm thinking of doing a longer version of that, because what I gave her was a short version. And as with everything else, the moment you finish something, hand it in, now you have all these other ideas. And you go, so now I'm going to do and I'm going to work on that. So
Cool.
That's a good place to be, though.
Yeah, no, I just wish that, you know what? Has anyone here ever suffered from writer's block?
Every now and again.
I don't understand what writer's block is. I might have finishing a story's block, but not writer's block.
I do have a Chihuahua though that is like writer's block a lot of times. So.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
No, I've never suffered from writer's block. In fact, I have these little notes everywhere. Okay. Jim knows about this, and I don't know, Carol, if you were there when I gave these out. I went to one of the meetings and I gave out what I personally think is the best thing for writers ever made. And it's a shower notepad. Okay, I don't know how many of you know about this, but it is gold to me. Because for some reason, and I don't know how many of you do this, I get my best ideas when I'm in the shower. I don't know why. Maybe because we were fish originally. I don't know. But I forget them by the time I step out of the shower. Therefore, I have a pad there. I know a couple of writers I've given them to like them. A couple of other writers have gone, what the hell is this? And but if you don't use it for writing, you could always use it as a grocery list when you think of something. But I have to tell you, having a pad handy, whenever you think of these things, I've got all these notes everywhere. I don't think I'm ever going to run out of stuff, just have to finish things.
That's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah. How do you guys get your ideas? How do you keep track of your ideas?
Well, Linda Addison says, wow, shower notepad. Needs this, my precious.
Give me your address. Linda, send me your address. I will send you one. I have a couple of extras. I load up on them. I am not kidding. I'm keeping them in business. But where do you keep track of your ideas? Because I have tried different things, but I need a all-one solution, and I haven't found a good one. I've tried Evernote. I've tried paper notes. Now I have piles of paper notes. I've tried scanning my paper notes, but then I don't remember how to log them. What do you guys do?
I use Google Notes a lot, and then it switches up with my Google Drive, so I can
Google Notes or Google Keep?
I guess it's Keep, but then I switch it over to Google Notes.
Oh, is there a Google Notes?
No, I guess it's just Drive. I call it Notes. It's the thing that I open up in Drive, and I call it Notes.
In other words, okay.
Yeah, so I just switch everything back over there, and then I can start it. That's where a lot of my poetry comes from, is in the shower. Get an idea, dictate it. Yeah, many poems are in the shower.
Okay, there you go. You got the rest of you?
I just use a Word doc for every story idea. I have a story idea, I open up another Word doc, type whatever I need to type, and then I go back and do a roadmap kind of thing of different ideas. So I have hundreds of these one-page things in my computer, saved twice, just to be clear, everything's backed up. And eventually I'll find, I'll be going through one day years later and be like, what was I thinking? Maybe I should write this. This sounds more interesting than what I'm working on now.
Kind of like the notes on the walls that we wrote.
Yes.
Well, what about you guys? I know Carol has dictation software, so she's probably dictating everywhere she is.
I may write many of my stories in the car, as long as there's no traffic and I know where I'm going.
You're so good. I would so hit a pedestrian if I did that.
Well, that's what highways are for. Yeah.
That's what?
That's what highways are for. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no pedestrians. I see. Okay.
Just so they're
Yeah. So let's just circle back to Angela, though, to find out what you have that's coming up on the horizon.
I actually made a list because usually this question just stumps me and I just kind of go, there's some stuff. But I have a list because I'm being organized. Coming up with a poetry book that I'm writing with my daughter, Kira Kyle, who is normally known as Kira Starr. She does all the stuff behind the Space and Time website and handles the flash battles. And if you ever think that I'm smart, no, it's all the people behind the scenes at Space and Time. Gordon probably knows this. It's just all the people back there. But so we're writing a poetry book together called Crack and Fever. And that is coming out April 6th, I think. And I just had a story coming out in the Pixel Project's Giving the Devil His Due. I was a last minute addition. It's a Twilight Zone style revenge story kind of thing of men who abuse women and girls getting their just desserts. And my story is called Justice League. The anthology will be out September 1st. And mine is based on a real life manager. So there's some reality in there. It's like part autobiography. So, and let's see, we've got the magazine coming out, of course, this month, number 140, issue 140. And I just was named poetry editor for Planets Rising, which is a magazine for the Asgardians, which you may not know what they are, but they are the first space nation. It's a micronation. And I just thought that was just too cool. I'm not an Asgardian yet. I have not paid that fee, but I thought it was just super cool to have a space nation and be a part of it. So
Very awesome.
yeah, I want my little tiny greenhouse on the satellite.
That's cool.
You, Angela, have you ever seen that movie? What's that movie with? Oh God, I can't. I'm at that age. The actor that he's still on a space station is keeping track of all this greenery. This is like a 1970 something film. With
Running?
Yeah, I know. What is it?
Silent Running?
Silent
yes,
Running, yes.
yes. Angela, have you ever seen it?
Maybe. I am like the worst person for movies. I was like,
remembering them
in the 70s.
Well, if you can if you can catch it, I think you'd like it.
Yeah, what is it?
Silent Running.
Okay, I'll check it out.
And Gary, you get a gold star for that. Good job.
Thank you. That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
I've never seen the movie.
But
Well,
you know
I think
what?
as far as
I
Bruce
saw
Dern,
pictures of it in the book, so
Yeah. I've seen it maybe a few years ago. Yeah. So Jim, how about you? What do you have coming up?
you know, I'm still not able to really talk about anything. I have the next issue of Cemetery Dance will have a story of mine called "They Listen." And that hopefully will be out relatively soon. I think it's issue 78, if I'm not mistaken. And a bunch of stuff coming up after that is not yet announced, or I have to keep under wraps for various reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully one of these episodes I'll be able to report some real stuff.
But I love the tease. I really do. Yeah. And I have some stuff I can't talk about, but I have one that I can. I have a cryptid anthology that's coming out in spring of 2022. If you could actually say that, is that, a year? I don't know. We're not going to be stuck in this year forever, right? So that's
yeah, that was 2020.
Yeah, I don't even know. Yeah, and I do have a story in the anthology that Alp is in, and a number of us from HWA New York are in, for the Hell's Mall, Sinister Shops, Cursed Objects, and Maddening Crowds from Lefkadio Press. So that's got some bunch of creepy stories about shopping. So that's fun.
Well,
So cool. You guys are so much fun to talk with.
Yeah, this is awesome.
yeah.
You guys are great hosts.
Yeah, that's
no
good.
kidding.
You can only have fun if the people on the other side are just as much fun.
You guys rock.
You guys are so sweet, and we're going to send you your $5, as soon as the show's over.
Wait a minute. You told me it's 20.
What's up with that
I thought it
five?
was 20. 5? Oh, I'm splitting them with everybody.
Right.
Okay. That's
Well,
fair.
thank you all for your fantastic readings tonight. Thank you for sharing your work with us. We really enjoyed it and appreciate it. Our audience, thank you for your great questions. Thank you for joining us. It's always a
Fun,
treat.
Thank you.
What's that?
This was fun. Thank you.
Yeah, and I have to say, it's always a treat each time we do Galactic Terrors to see so many people coming back every month and to see new names in the chat and asking questions. Certainly, just a reminder to hit the like and subscribe options on YouTube. Sign up for our newsletter, which I will throw up that link again.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Unfortunately, we can't yet make this clickable, but I'll leave that up there long enough for hopefully everyone to jot it down or figure it out.
And Carol, probably you put it on the YouTube thing anyway, right?
Yeah, that's on our
Oh,
YouTube
yeah.
thing as well. Yeah.
Okay. And we hope you'll come back next month. April 8th will be our next New York HWA NY's Galactic Terrors reading. We do these on the second Thursday, right, Carol?
Yes, sir. The second Tuesday.
Second
Thursday.
second Thursday of the month, every month. And we'll be announcing our lineup for April soon. We hope to see you there. I think Carol also mentioned that we may be doing a special presentation of Galactic Terrors in April as part of the convention called Heliosphere. So this is a local convention that takes place up in Tarrytown, New York. and it's relatively new. I think this would be officially maybe their 6th or 7th year, and it was canceled last year due to the pandemic. It typically happens in April, and it, right at the
we did a little online one, and that was actually when we got together to do our first reading online. And we got Zoom bombed something fierce, which is one of the reasons that we went to StreamYard to do our episodes here instead of opening up the world to that was way too much fun. But yeah, so it's kind of fun to see it come up again. Looking able to do another reading for them. It's great, some panels, some good stuff.
Yeah, so look for that if you're interested, and you don't have to be local to take advantage of it because it will be virtual. It's Heliosphere. I think it's heliosphere.org for the website.
I think so, and we'll put the links down below as well.
Yeah, that'd be great. And other than that, I hope you'll sign up for the newsletter. If you want more information about the New York chapter of the HWA, you can check out our website, hwany.org.
Yeah.
It's going good.
Yeah. And
all right, some big things for the HWA. And please, really, what Jim said and Carol, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. The more subscriptions, the more they feature us. So it is kind of important. Even if you never go on again, which I really hope is not the case, subscribe.
Yeah.
And if you're joining us for the first time tonight, all of our past sessions are available there. They're recorded, and you can go back and listen.
And they're awesome.
There are some really fantastic readings there. Just like tonight, I think you guys did a wonderful job, and we've been really fortunate with our authors for the whole Galactic Terrors reading series to have really terrific readings and great fiction every month. So thank you all tonight for joining us. Thanks for taking the time. Thanks to everyone in our audience.
Yes.
Thank you to our audience. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Carol.
Yes, thank you for being on.
Awesome. And thank you, Gordon, for even starting Space and Time instead of drinking back in high school. I did. I probably back in high school to start a magazine.
Thank you for keeping it alive.
I think Gordon made a conscious decision in high school. He's like, if I drink too much in high school, I won't wind up with a literary award named after me somewhere in the early 2020s.
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to
60 years from now.
I just want to call attention to the fact that autocorrect is never my friend. I have my phone here, which is the way that I can actually communicate with the chats here. And I was just typing a message to John Palisano, who said, put it into Quick Bites, our HWA newsletter. And I typed, absolutely, John, thanks. Well, no, it came up absurdity, John, thanks. So, yeah, absolutely. We will do that.
All right. And on that note, thank you all. Have a great night, and we hope to see you again in April.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.